Rogers TV St. John's.
Focused on quality and convenience, there isn't much you won't find at Marie's Mini Mart. Home-style breads, sandwiches, plus a variety of artisan breads and delicious single-serve desserts available exclusively at our Frecker Drive location. Marie's Mini Mart, with 25 locations wherever you go, there we are.
Hello, I'm Karl Wells. My guest today is from Spaniards Bay, Newfoundland. Before she entered elected politics, she was a journalist for over 10 years. Then she became the MHA for Harbour Grace, Portagrave, then the Deputy Speaker of the Newfoundland and Labrador Legislature, and is currently the Provincial Minister responsible for women and gender equality. It's my pleasure to welcome the Honourable Pam Parsons to the program. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you so much, Karl.
Before we move into the more serious biographical stuff, I want to reveal something. I'm sure the people in your district know this, but you actually love to play the guitar and sing in public. Is that not true?
It is true, and I do. I love it, and I do it quite often, actually. Every opportunity I get, and I've been doing it since I was a young child.
Really?
I have,
yeah. So did you have a band when you were young too?
I've had bands over the years that I've performed with, and now and then we'll do some bands along the way. I'll sing with a group or perform, and also some solo stuff. And now it's about charity. I do it, of course, for charity.
That's great.
And every opportunity I get, and I can also do it as an MHA in my district, because there are many events happening that when people need support, and wherever I can, I'm happy to bring the guitar. The only place I haven't been able to do it yet is in the House of Assembly, Karl.
I'm sure you're working on that. Yeah, it must be great for the organizations in your district, because when they're looking for entertainment, they'll just say, "Oh, we'll get Pam."
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's good. What kind of music, by the way?
I like everything. I mean, I love, of course, our traditional Newfoundland music. I love a bit of country music, some rock, some pop. The crowd pleasers.
You're probably open to
are the
requests
ones.
too, are you?
Yeah, I do. And I tell you, when going through COVID and the pandemic gave us an opportunity to really get into what we call the Facebook Lives.
Yeah.
For people and musicians who do it for a living, of course, they couldn't get out and on the go, so
yeah.
They would often do a Facebook Live. So I did that as well. And people enjoy it, and I enjoy it. And certainly, I think it's beneficial all around for the people performing the music, as well as the people who are listening to it and singing along at home.
Yeah. So, when you were, say a teenager, what were you thinking of in terms of a career looking to the future? I mean, we all, I guess, were kind of forced to think about it once we get into high school. What kind of things were you thinking about?
Well, it's funny because my friends now, when we talk, my friends I went to high school with, they say, "So Pam, you said you wanted to be on TV, and you did that." And I also ran actually for a student body in high school as well. And I mean, thinking back on now, that's an elected process, democracy at the core root. So I think I've always been drawn to public life. I was always interested in current affairs and news, if you will, and entertainment. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of doing that in across the board and through politics. I really enjoyed my journalism career. That was my first love. After university, I went on and did radio, television arts, and as you mentioned, of course, I did journalism first.
Yeah, so when you went to Mount St. Vincent in Nova Scotia, you majored in political science, right?
I did, yeah.
So was there an area of political science that you were interested in, like Canadian politics, public policy, international relations?
All of those topics I found very, very intriguing. And it was actually during the time when 9/11 happened, when I was actually in a political science class at the time. And of course, that dominated a lot of our political topics and conversation throughout a number of political courses that I did. But I loved it. And there was one project in particular that I got an opportunity to act as a moderator or a guest or a host, actually. It was for a political project I did, and that's when I really enjoyed, and noticed that, hey, I like to do moderating. I like to, ask questions and interview, and so. And it was actually during a summer job while I was in Halifax at the Mount, and I became a tour guide for on the Harbour Hopper. It's an amphibious tour in Halifax, and where you perform and you're speaking and you're entertaining guests. And so I really enjoyed speaking for a living per se. And so it was following that, I just, the path unfolded.
So when you left university, having studied political science, were you feeling more inclined to get into politics, or less so, or were you?
I was really geared toward, and my interest was toward news and journalism.
Yeah.
And it was then following the completion of my degree at the Mount, where I went to the NSCC, King's Tech College in the Annapolis Valley, where I went to Radio, Television Arts, did that program, where I did a major in broadcast journalism.
Right. So you were kind of firmly focused then on
at that point
going into radio or television.
Absolutely, and
yeah.
It was so fun. I enjoyed university, but the college experience is a bit different, as we can appreciate. And it was funny. I did well in university, but I did really well in broadcast journalism. I was so interested in it, so passionate about it. And I remember actually one of my favorite professors in the course, Dave Bannerman. And when I'd get a mark, it was a good mark, usually in the 90s, and I'd go back and I'd negotiate and say, I think I deserve more marks here. But I was really passionate about broadcast, and I still am, and I love it. And who knows what the future holds with regards to hosting or, whatever. But and it's intertwined. I found, after my journalism career, I worked for CBC Here and Now, where I first met you, of course.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, when I met you first. And I remember when we first met in the hallway one day, coming out of the studio, and you did impress me as being somebody who was ambitious, energetic, ready to take on any assignment and run with it. Is that pretty much how you saw yourself?
Well, I think so. I guess now that I look back. But I remember always being that way as a child, like seeing a goal, what I wanted, and just focusing on it, and not necessarily focusing on, the obstacles in between. I know, and I don't know where I get this. My parents are not political in any kind of way, but my mother tells me, you came out that way. that's how you were born, and you're right, and that's what it's all about. And I really think too, and I'm grateful for my experiences in journalism, how it really prepared me for politics and elected life, because there's many challenges, as you know.
Yeah, and you had a lot of experiences because you worked at CBC, you worked here at Rogers, you worked at Rogers in Ontario, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you accepted an appointment to the staff at NTV, and you worked as a video journalist there.
I did. Yeah.
So in all the years you did journalism, was there a particular story that you covered that really kind of stuck in your memory?
Well, there are a number, actually, of stories that I did. I really like the human interest stories. And when I got an opportunity to do political stories as well, I remembered I covered the H1N1 when that was happening here, that crisis here in the province. That was something else. And I followed that. But there's one story that stays with me. It's not necessarily a positive story at all. It was the death of Anne-Marie Sheeran. I covered that. I was assigned to that story. And as we know, she lost her life tragically at the hands of her partner, and I'll never forget that. That was a full summer covering that, and that really lines up with the work I'm doing now, being the Minister for Women and Gender Equality. We know we have an issue, not just in Newfoundland, Labrador, but across Canada and ultimately the globe, with gender-based violence, and how important it is to educate and to promote and to teach children at a very young age.
Yeah, and I know that the trans community are being affected badly. Not perhaps so much here in Newfoundland, but it seems like worldwide there's a lot of negativity being directed towards the trans community. But before we get into talking about your portfolio, I wanted to ask you about your political heroes. Did you have any political heroes when you were coming up?
Well, I tell you, it was actually one of the first political science courses that I was in. It was Dr. Peter McKenna was my prof at the time, and he really admired Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And so we heard a lot about Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and I was very impressed, his views on human rights and ethics. Ultimately, I think that's my most important priority in politics. That's what leads me. I guess my moral compass is my first priority are human rights and social rights. But hearing a lot about him, I also have to look to our our neighboring country, the United States, Hillary Clinton. I was a big fan of her. Very, very disappointed, unfortunately, that she didn't become president.
So were a lot of people.
I remember that night and, watching the clock and watching TV around the clock, rather, for the results. But, it's women like that who take the step, who step up, because we see a lot of men, of course, and a lot of men have done a lot of great things, throughout history. But, it's a smaller number in women who step up, and women who do, take that plunge and put themselves out there, because, Karl, it's a known fact that women have a different experience than men, and of course gender diverse people than men in politics and leadership and business even. So I really commend the women who, also our very first premier here, I have to give her props, Kathy Dunderdale. I mean, she took on a big role. And the women that we have now, Deputy Premier Siobhan Cody, she's doing a great job as well. So
do you have any thoughts on what we can do to encourage more women to get involved in politics?
Well, we're doing a lot of initiatives now currently in government, for example, investing in women in ventures, business ventures. I know there was a big investment just under $1 million just recently by our government, to support women in tech, women and gender diverse people in particular in tech. And, we need more women at the table, and it's about making space for women at that table, and we need everybody on board to do that. We need men supporting women. And so it's those initiatives, as well as programs, funding. But ultimately, it's the basic, back to the basic rules about respect and about acceptance and about diversity and inclusion.
So let's go back to your broadcasting career. At a certain point when you were with NTV, you decided to make the leap and to run. Was there anything in particular that happened that made you decide to do that? Well,
it was throughout journalism and also reflecting back in my high school times. I knew at some point that I'd like to pursue public office and really, take that plunge and make that leap, as you say. And it is a leap because it's a risk. And as you know, as you're working as a journalist, if you run for politics or associate with a political party, you can't necessarily walk back into a newsroom if things don't work out right away. But I was actually approached by an MHA at the time who was a minister, actually for the Tory government, to ask me to run. I was at NTV at the time. I wasn't prepared to walk away completely then from journalism, but it really got the wheels turning in my head, and said really seriously then started thinking about it. And it was in 2013 during the robust Liberal leadership campaign, when we had a number of candidates come forward for the leadership, was when I actually was hired to work on one of the campaigns as a media liaison and communications work. And I went from there. I took every opportunity. There's a lot of volunteering as well in politics with by-elections, and there was a lot of that happening at that time. And of course, and that was the perfect segue then, that I said, I'm going to run myself. I'm going to seek the nomination, the Liberal nomination in the district where I came from. I mean, I had moved away for university, and I had lived in metro area, of course, during journalism time. But I wanted to go back to my roots, and there were two districts I was considering. One was Harbour, Maine, where my parents currently live. They moved about 15 years ago to Holyrood, where my mother's from originally. And of course, Portagrave, and it was Portagrave at the time. But I thought about it, and I said, no, I have to, where I came from, my roots, I can literally go to, all the communities, knock on a door, and know people to go in and sit down and have a cup of tea and a chat. And so I said, I want to go home again. And I never knew, when I was away in Halifax and doing my studies, I never thought that I would live back home again. But it took me right back full circle, and I'm living now in the community of Bay Roberts.
Well, as Lyndon Johnson was fond of reminding people, timing is everything in politics, and it looks like you picked the right time because you won handily, didn't you?
There were 6 candidates first that sought that nomination, and I did. I won, I think it was about 67% maybe of the vote for 6 candidates. And I'm very grateful to have the support and to be re-elected for the 3rd time in the district of what's now called Harbour Grace Portagrave. Very grateful to have that support. It's an honor to represent the people where I came from, and I'm really loving this. I'm really happy.
You know, it just occurred to me that there's an awful lot of politicians who used broadcasting as kind of a launching pad to get into politics, and you can go right back. I mean, Joey Smallwood was in radio, and a famous radio celebrity when he got into politics. Don Jameson, Brian Tobin, John Nolan. Well, I can go on and on. Yeah. So there's kind of that tradition, and you're a part of it. But you didn't have that in mind, I suppose, when
not when I first started.
You didn't pick broadcasting because it would, kind of give you a profile. Although it certainly doesn't help, and I wouldn't fault anybody for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I remember when I was finishing my undergraduate degree, I was thinking about law because I've always had the dream to be a lawyer as well, and my parents always said, well, you can certainly argue. So it was between broadcast and law school that I was considering following my degree, but I went with my heart and my passion, and broadcast is the route that I took, and I love it. I don't regret it. It's amazing, and again, it comes in handy big time when I'm communicating and getting the message out in this career.
Name recognition is everything, I think, in politics. I mean, because so many people look at that ballot and say, oh yeah, I know this one and that one. It's not the way you're supposed to do it, but anyway, that's the way it turns out often. So what was that first campaign like?
Oh, it was exciting, and I mean, I remember just hitting the ground running. It was a large district. The district has been changed, but you'll be surprised how long it takes to knock on doors and to get around to speak to as many people as you possibly can, and that's the approach I took. I just hit the ground. I wanted to talk to people one-on-one. I'd go to whatever community events I knew that were happening, and I still do. I still maintain that practice today because it's very important, to stay humble and to stay on the ground with the people who elect you, because ultimately it's about them. And when they have a problem, or when they want to promote a project, or a community enhancement idea, whatever, they need your help, and they want to know that you're there for them, and that's something that I remember that every morning when I start my day, that's prominent in my mind. Even as a minister, it's an extra responsibility, of course, and I take the same approach actually as a minister with community stakeholders. I like to meet them one-on-one and to have that rapport and to know that we're a team. That's what it's about. It's a team approach, and we're all ultimately working toward, the greatest good goal, right?
Deputy Speaker. That seems like such a task to me. I mean, the first thing I thought was, well, don't you have to know Robert's Rules of Order inside out to take on something like that? I mean, was that quite a learning curve, or? It
is, and it still is, to know the ins and outs of the House of Assembly and the legislative process, and all the rules ultimately, and what you can do and what you can't do, and what's parliamentary. And it is. I mean, you lead ultimately the session, the House, that the Speaker does. And I actually ran for Speaker, for the position of Speaker. There was a cabinet shuffle back in the early years, actually, after 2015, when I was first elected. And I think I am the first woman to actually run for the position. And then, shortly after, I was appointed Deputy Speaker, which was...
you're only the 3rd woman to have
yeah.
held that position, I think.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a great opportunity, and to be Speaker of the House of Assembly, I think it's amazing. It's a wonderful privilege to do so. And I just attended a conference this summer. There were a couple, actually. I'm also the representative for the Women's Commonwealth Parliament. I'm the representative for Newfoundland and Labrador, so I get to collaborate with colleagues across the country. And we do have a woman speaker currently out west, and she's she's so inspirational to listen to her speak, and you know, she's graceful and at the same time firm, and you know, she's got the audacity, and it's great to be around women like that, to be surrounded, of course, with common goals, and it's just uplifting and inspiring for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a woman speaker in the House of Commons in Britain, I think, at one point. I used to love watching her. She took no prisoners.
Well, that's important to do, to keep decorum and to keep things on rails. I mean, because as you know, there's a lot of passion. I'll use that word to describe it. Passion in the House of Assembly. So it's important to keep order.
Yeah. So now, when Premier Fury chose you to become a member of his cabinet, how did that happen? Did it come out of the blue? Like, did he just call you up on the phone one day? And
it's an invite from the Premier, and you know, he did just that, and he invited me to come in for a meeting. And when he didn't waste any time. He certainly invited me to become a member, and he changed the portfolio. Actually, he expanded the mandate. What used to be the status of women, but it's now called Women and Gender Equality. So I was thrilled, and it's probably one of the best moments of my life, and one of the best memories I'll cherish.
Yeah, it sounds like a bigger portfolio now. What is your mandate, or did he give you certain objectives for you? Like, did he say, well, I want this done, this done, this done, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every minister receives what's called a mandate letter, and objectives that they are to work toward in their time in the portfolio. And of course, a few of the big ones come to mind. Pay equity is big right now. It's huge, and I will say work is happening consistently on that front.
Progress.
Absolutely. And I look forward to when the Premier is actually on record committing to some progress actually this fall in the legislature, so I will tell you to stay tuned on that. Also, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as you know, is a huge, huge topic across the country. And I know the Prime Minister is very passionate about it, as well as our Premier. And so that's something very important to my portfolio, is to work toward implementing the calls to justice, the 231 calls, to work with colleagues. I mean, other ministers, such as Minister of Justice, Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation, are also mandated with that task as well. And that's just to name a few.
There is something which I know you're interested in, because we had a conversation about this one day. You were saying that you would like to see more teaching about our Indigenous peoples and the LGBT community in our schools, correct?
Absolutely, and I'm passionate about that, and I'm remembering back in my school years, I didn't learn, or there was no textbook information about Indigenous history and what had happened. And it's only now through courses that we're doing in sensitivity training what those people were subjected to. And it's you know, we need to know. And the first part of reconciliation is knowing and being aware of what happened. So I think, and it's the same as with the 2S LGBTQIA community. We need to see this. I'd like to see this enriched now in our curriculum, in our school K-12 system, get at the grassroots levels, and to teach and make young kids aware, because I think that's where we'll get the best progress. Our children are our future. And to having them, you know, learn about the history, what had happened here, and what, of course, even the history of LGBTQIA+, what those people endure, and I really think it's very important to promote acceptance, you know, inclusivity, respect, safe communities, and I think our most precious resources are our young children, and it's crucial that they learn and that they are aware.
So from either a district or ministerial perspective, what's been one of the high points of your career thus far?
Well, I will say, and my colleagues would probably chuckle if they heard me say this, but Coley's Point Primary School was that was made clear to me that we needed a new school, and that was housed. It's in the community, the municipality of Bay Roberts in Coley's Point, and it services kids from Portagrave, Barony, Shearstown, Butlerville, Bay Roberts proper, Colliers Point, and even up as far as Clark's Beach. And it's an old building. It was over 65 years old. And it was made clear to me before I became the official candidate, before I became the MHA, we really needed a new school. There's been a lot of talk about it, but no action. So I made that one of my main objectives, main goals. And I mean, I talked about it every opportunity I could, every meeting I could get with the ministers responsible, with the premier at the time, which was Dwight Ball. And I remember I even presented a petition. And of course, even as a government MHA, I presented a petition on behalf of my constituents about this. But I'm happy to say, you know, some years, just not too long after, it was a commitment of $16.2 million. We know that price went a little bit higher, but I'm happy to say we've got a brand new school now out in Bay Roberts for the K-12, and it certainly has made a great difference in a lot of happy people. Parents, school community, kids, and they deserve that. They deserve to learn and grow in a healthy, modern facility.
We're out of time, and it's been a great chat. I've enjoyed having you on the program. I hope I wasn't too rough on you.
I'm happy to be here.
I know I wasn't. Anyway, all the best to you in the future. My guest has been the Honourable Pam Parsons, the Minister responsible for women and gender equality. That's it for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. See you again next time.